Namaste, aloha. Welcome again to a Krsna book reading. My name is Janapati Das, and thank you for joining me. Please accept my respects, and let me offer my respectful obeisances unto my Guru Dev, Siddhaswarupananda, Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, and to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who's very kindly translated the Krsna book readings into from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so we're going to start off with some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names, as we normally do. So please join along. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Iti Namine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Raja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, welcome back again. It's been a few weeks since the last reading, and we are going to continue from where we left off in the Krsna book reading. And we are, let's see, I'm trying to just remember. Let me go back 2, 3. We come back to the story about Jardsanda, the king. So yeah, Krsna wrecks the Dwarka fort. So because after Krsna killed Kamsa, one of the reasons that Krsna had comes to the material world is to annihilate demoniac forces. And so Kamsa, of course, being one of the major demoniac forces, Krsna and Balaram took care of that and all the demons that he'd sent. But there were still many forces out there that were threatening to Krsna and to the Yadu dynasty. And so because he was in Mathura and he worried about the citizens of Mathura, he created a fort out in the ocean, so which the residents could be protected. And this fort, of course, as they will explain in different stories as they come up, where it was an incredible fort. And actually, there's a lot of archaeological evidence to show that this Dwarka, because Dwarka was an island, but it was basically supported on the water. There was no foundation, but it was actually created within, just like Lord Ramachandra had created a bridge by putting floating rocks. And then when Lord Ramachandra no longer needed it, the rocks sunk. And so now you can see between India and Sri Lanka, there is what they call a sandbar, but actually if they've excavated and they found that there's rocks lined up in a perfect line at the bottom of because the rocks that were floating by the power of Ramachandra was floating and then sunk when it was no longer needed. It's similar with the Dwarka fort. So they were there to protect Jardsanda, because Jardsanda basically was a friend and the father-in-law of King Kamsa. So he despised the Yadu dynasty and he despised Krsna, and he tried to attack Krsna. And that's where we left off last time. Lord Balaram, who is known as Shankar Shan, began to fight with his club in such a heroic way that the river of blood created by Krsna overflooded. So they were cutting off the heads of the soldiers of Jardsand. Those who were cowards became very much afraid upon seeing the ghastly and horrible scene, and those who were heroes began to talk delightedly among themselves about the heroism of the two brothers. So this is the way of Kshatriyas. We've talked about the warrior caste, the administrative caste of this time. They were great warriors, incredible warriors. I mean, even the greatest soldiers of today they pale in comparison to these warriors. Super military power, very well educated in military science, and oftentimes very educated in spiritual science, like Arjuna, the warrior, and who's also in the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, was the greatest warrior ever. He could basically shoot hundreds and thousands of arrows in a minute. They would just be like incredibly powerful and very strong. So, but in the etiquette, there were so many rules and etiquettes about soldiers that it was just kind of unheard of in this day and age, where great enemies could be fighting with each other, and at the end of the day, by the etiquette of the kshatriya, you would go and you would eat and have dinner with you and celebrate with these enemies of yours as if they were your brothers. That was the kshatriya code. And so they had all these rules, and actually kshatriyas could be great enemies and still admire the great power of their enemies, their adversaries. Although Jarasandha was equipped with a vast ocean of military strength, the fighting of Lord Krishna and Balaram converted a whole situation into a ghastly scene which was far beyond ordinary fighting. Persons of ordinary mind cannot estimate how it could be possible when the activities are accepted as pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whose will everything is possible, then this can be understood. That's a very clear point. There's a lot of things we can't understand from our mind. But what is possible is kind of what's that old adage that, what is impossible with man is possible by God, or what is possible by God is impossible by man. God can make anything possible. But when such activities are accepted as pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whose will everything is possible, then this can be understood. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is creating, maintaining, and dissolving the cosmic manifestation by his will only. So it's oftentimes people are like, how could God create the universe? How can God do this? How can God? As if they somehow or another are trying to compare their little p achievements as in this material body with God. Like, I can't create a universe. I can barely, any man I know can't even, maintain, this kind of ability. But God can do that? How can God do that? It's an ignorant kind of thing. If you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from which everything emanates, what is there to be known about that? How is that not possible? It's beyond our comprehension, but it's beyond our comprehension because our ability to comprehend is very limited with our mind. So he says, the Supreme Personality is creating, maintaining, and dissolving this cosmic manifestation by his will only. Who's to say that? I mean, this one universe, the universe is so vast in that there are innumerable universes that are emanating from an expansion of the body of Krishna, an expansion of an expansion. All these of multiple dimensions, just thousands and millions and infinite numbers of universes coming in, that God is able to maintain and expand his body, be present within Krishna Loka and Vaikuntha Loka, and at the same time be expanded into all the universes and maintaining it in every atom. It's mind-boggling. And that it sometimes is just really, not a lot of times, it's just very baffling to scientists who can't wrap their brain around it, which is the point. And this is only his will. It's not like he's, sitting there going, thinking about that, It's by his will, by his ability to be present within everything, but yet not present. For him to create such a vast scene of devastation while fighting with an enemy is not so wonderful, and yet because Krishna and Balaram were fighting with Jarasandha, just like an ordinary human beings, the affair appeared to be wonderful. All the soldiers of Jarasandha were killed, and he was the only one left alive. Certainly, he became very depressed at this point. Sri Balaram immediately arrested him just with great strength. One lion captures another lion. But while Lord Balaram was binding Jarasandha with the rope of Varuna and ordinary ropes also, Lord Krishna, with a greater plan in mind in the future, asked him not to arrest him. Jarasandha was then released by Krishna. As a great fighting hero, Jarasandha became very much ashamed, and he decided that he would no longer live as a king, but would resign from his position in the royal order and go to the forest to practice meditation under severe austerities and penances. So what people did, they basically go off to the forest. But he was a great king, and because he was demoniac and not particularly spiritually intelligent, you'll see what happens. He gets influenced by demons because he's demoniac. He gets influenced by demons very easily. So even with birds of a feather flock together. oftentimes people may come to a point and realize, I don't really want to live my life like this, but because they're very weak spiritually, they have no strength within, they're easily influenced by people around them, which is why it's a very good, important point as devotees of Krishna to try not initially to engage in association with non-devotees. In other words, what does that mean? It means that, it doesn't mean that you don't talk to people who don't chant or don't engage in spiritual life, or you don't associate with them in some ways, but you don't just give your whole heart and your whole life to just whoever, right? When you're dealing with your spiritual life, it's a very precious, like little bird. Right, and you don't just like, oh, here we go, or you're like a little baby. You're not just giving your baby to everybody. You engage in a situation. You associate with people who are like-minded, your spiritual master, people who are chanting, so that you're influenced. Your heart is influenced in such a way that it becomes strengthened in the service to Krishna. So if you are engaging in something where you don't, it's kind of common knowledge. If you don't engage in something one way, you're going to be influenced by another way. So it's, if you're worldly minded people that you associate with, they're like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm trying to do my meditation. And then they're like, oh, yeah, no, don't worry about that. Let's go to a movie. Or, hey, let's go to the bar. And you're like, oh, I don't drink, and I don't eat. You don't drink, you don't eat. And then after a while, they're like, come on, one little sip. And they're like, and you find yourself drinking and eating meat because it's a peer pressure kind of thing. So similarly, if you're around people who are chanting, then you find, oh, this is very attractive and I want to do that. And you find yourself becoming much more grounded in your spiritual life, so that when you do have to associate with people who are not spiritually minded, you're respectful and you're kind, but you're in control of your mind. You're in control of your life, and you can show that through your heart. And that a lot of times people will become attracted to that and say, wow, that's really neat. What are you doing? You can show them what you're doing. You can tell them about chanting. Sometimes they just may be envious in general. They just may not want to. And you still give them respect and get it, but you're not swayed by their, the way they think. So that was a point. So we're going to talk about that, because Jarasandha, you see what happens with him. After as he was returning home with his other royal friends, however, they advised him not to retire, but to regain strength to fight again with Krishna in the near future. See, that's the stupidity. It's like you realize you just got your ass whooped, and he'll find out that he gets whooped like 18 times. But Krishna, having a plan in mind, and you'll see that in the future stories of what happens, he allows his devotees to serve him and do service for him, even in killing the enemies. Krishna could easily have killed Jarasandha. He wiped out him and Balaram completely wiped out Jarasandha's forces. And these are people that are not like simple warriors. They are like great warriors, an amazing, powerful army. Jarasandha was terrorizing other kingdoms and other, Yadu dynasty, and it was a kind of a big thorn in the side, So it wasn't like it was very difficult, but for Krishna it wasn't very difficult, but he had a point for it. So they said, come on, you shouldn't go off to the forest. We need someone to rule the kingdom, right? So the princely friend of Jarasandha began to instruct him that ordinarily would not have been possible for him to have been defeated by the strength of the Yadu kings, but the defeat which he experienced was simply due to his ill luck. Stupid means stupid. I mean, stupid advice is stupid. They're like, oh, you got it. That was just luck. It was like, it's... But princely order, these are all princes, these are part of these demon kshatriyas that Krishna came to, because they're ignorant and they're kind of stupid because they think they're so powerful and puffed up. Princely order encouraged King Jarasandha. His fighting, they said, was certainly heroic. Therefore, he should not take his defeat very seriously, as it was due only to his past mistakes. After all, there was no fault in his fighting. In this way, Jarasandha, the king of Magadha province, having lost all his strength and having been insulted by his arrest and subsequent release, could do nothing but return to his kingdom. So, even in the warrior Kshatriya race, if you've been defeated, you'll fight to the death. That's the way to go. You know, I'm going to fight to the death, and that's honor. There's honor in that. It's actually very shameful to be captured and then not released, you know, not killed, but released. That's like humiliating. Like you just have to go back and say, oh, I got beaten. I'm still alive, but all your, you know, my whole army is killed. So, thus Lord Krishna conquered the soldiers of Jarasandha, although Krishna's army was tiny in comparison to Jarasandha's. Not a pinch of his strength was lost, whereas all of Jarasandha's men were killed. Nobody was killed in Krishna's. That's why it says with Krishna, what was it? With Krishna, you cannot be killed. If Krishna doesn't want you to be killed, and if Krishna, and with Krishna, if you're going to be killed, there's nothing you can do to save yourself. I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but basically, there is all victory. That's what is said at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. With Krishna and Arjuna, or Krishna, just in Krishna and Balaram, Krishna, anybody, any devotee of Krishna, there is always victory. That's why we say Jaya Jaya, victory. Jaya Jaya Sri Krishna, you know, all victory. At that time, the denizens of heaven became very pleased and began to offer their respects by chanting in the glorification of the Lord and by showering him with flowers. They accepted the victory with great appreciation. And because the denizens of heaven, all the demigods, are always hassled by these demons. They're very powerful, but they're not powerful to fight against a lot of demons. But Krishna, because they have to ultimately lower their false ego and to realize that they're servants of Krishna. The citizens of Mathura organized the combined services of a circus of professional singers like Sutas, Magadas, and poets who would compose nice songs, and they began to chant the victory glorification of Lord Krishna. When Lord Krishna entered the city after the victory, many bugles, conches, and kettle drums were sounded, and the vibrations of various musical instruments like Bharya, Turya, Veena, flute, and mridanga all joined together to make a beautiful reception. While Krishna was entertaining, the whole city was very much cleansed. All the different streets and roads were sprinkled with water, and the inhabitants, being joyous, decorated their respective houses, roads, and shops with flags and festoons. The Brahmanas chanted Vedic mantras at numerous places. The people constructed road crossings, entrances, lanes, and streets. When Lord Krishna was entering the nicely decorated city of Mathura, in a festive attitude, the ladies and girls of Mathura prepared different kinds of flower garlands to make the ceremony more auspicious. In accordance with the Vedic custom, they took yogurt mixed with freshly grown green grass and began to strew it here and there to make a victory jubilation even more auspicious. A little bit of a long story. Okay. As Krishna passed through the street, all the ladies and women began to regard him with great affection. Krishna and Balaram carried various kinds of booty, ornaments, and jewels carefully collected from the battlefield and presented them to King Ugrasena. If you remember, King Ugrasena was originally the king of Mathura and the Mathura district, which basically encompasses a huge amount of land, including Vrindavan and of course the Dwarka Fort area. But he was the father of King Kamsa, and King Kamsa had imprisoned him, right? Krishna thus offered his respects to his grandfather because he was at that time the crowned king of the Yadu dynasty, so the grandfather of Krishna. Jarasandha, the king of Magadha, not only besieged the city of Mathura once, but he attacked it 17 times in the same way. There we go. So he kept coming back, and every time he came back, he'd get defeated. And then people were like, oh, they were lucky. And he's like, oh, yeah, they were lucky. I can go back at it again. It's just the way of like when you do something, and oftentimes when you're just so arrogant that you don't realize you can't beat it. You just feel so like your false ego is so bruised that you have to keep coming back and create suffering all around you. Each and every time he was defeated, and all his soldiers were killed by Krishna, and each time he had to return disappointed in the same way. Each time the princely order of the Yadu dynasty arrested Jarasandha in the same way and again released him in an insulting manner. And each time Jarasandha shamelessly returned home. While Jarasandha was attempting one such attack, the Yavana king somewhere in the south of Mathura became attracted by the opulence of the Yadu dynasty and also attacked the city. So you have, of course, another demon king, Yavanas. They're actually a lower class citizens. It is said that the king of the Yavanas, known as Kali Yavana, was induced to attack by Narada. The story is narrated in the Vishnu Purana. Of course, Narada Muni always has an ulterior motive to try to expedite Krishna's pastimes. The story is narrated in the Vishnu Purana. Once Garga Muni, the priest of the Yadu dynasty, was taunted by his brother-in-law. When the kings of the Yadu dynasty heard the taunt, they laughed at him, and Garga Muni became angry at the Yadu kings. He decided that he would produce someone who would be very fearful to the Yadu dynasty, so he pleased Lord Shiva and received from him the benediction of a son. He begot this son, Kali Yavana, in the wife of a Yavana king. This Kali Yavana inquired from Narada, who are the most powerful kings in the world? Narada informed him that the Yadus were the most powerful. Being thus informed by Narada, Kali Yavana attacked the city of Mathura at the same time that Jarasandha attempted to attack it for the 18th time. Kali Yavana was very anxious to declare war on a king of the world who would be a suitable combatant for him, but he had not found any. However, being informed about Mathura by Narada, he thought it wise to attack the city. When he attacked Mathura, he brought with him 30 million Yavana soldiers. That's quite a large amount. That's like even more people than in Manila, Philippines. I think it's 24 million in Manila. When Mathura was thus besieged, Lord Sri Krishna began to consider how much the Yadu dynasty was in distress, being threatened by the attack of two formidable enemies, Jarasandha and Kali Yavana. Time was growing very short. Kali Yavana was already besieging Mathura from all sides, and it was expected that the next day Jarasandha would also come, equipped with the same number of divisions of soldiers as in his previous 17 attempts. Krishna was certain that Jarasandha would take advantage of the opportunity to capture Mathura when it was also being besieged by Kali Yavana. He therefore thought it wise to take precautionary measures to defend the strategic points of Mathura. If both Krishna and Balaram were engaged in fighting with Kali Yavana at one place, Jarasandha might come at another place to attack the whole Yadu family and take his revenge. Jarasandha was very powerful, and having been defeated 17 times, he might vengefully kill the members of the Yadu dynasty or arrest them to take them to his kingdom. Krishna therefore decided to construct a formidable fort in a place where no two-legged animal, either man or demon, could enter. He decided to keep his relatives there so that he would be free to fight with the enemy. So it appears that formerly Dwarka was also part of the kingdom of Mathura, because in the Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated that Krishna constructed a fort in the midst of the sea. Remnants of the fort which Krishna constructed are still existing on the Bay of Dwarka. So there we talk about the archaeological findings there. Ooh. So there's lots and lots and lots. How much time do I have? 29 minutes. Okay, so then now we start talking. I'll read a little bit about the Dwarka fort, because it goes on for a little bit, but we'll read some of that. He first of all constructed a very strong wall covering 96 square miles, and the wall itself was within the sea. It was certainly wonderful and well planned, and was constructed by Vishvakarma, who's the architect of the demigods. No ordinary architect could construct such a fort within the sea, but an architect like Vishvakarma, who is considered to be the engineer among the demigods, can execute such wonderful craftsmanship anywhere in any part of the universe. If huge planets can be floated in weightlessness in the outer space by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, surely the architectural construction of a fort within the sea, covering a space of 96 square miles, was not a very wonderful act. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that this new well-constructed city developed within the sea had regular planned roads, streets, and lanes. Not only were there well-planned roads, streets, and lanes, but there were well-planned paths and gardens filled with plants known as kalpavrikas, or desire trees. These desire trees are not like the ordinary trees of the material world. The desire trees are found in the spiritual world. By Krishna's supreme will, everything is possible, so such desire trees were planted in the city of Dwarka, constructed by Krishna. The city was also filled with many palaces and gopuras, or big gates. These gopuras are still found in some of the larger temples. They are very high and constructed with extremely artistic skill. Such palaces and gates held golden water pots, kalasha. These water pots on the gates or in the palaces are considered to be auspicious signs. So the Vedic system, you know, when the British came into India, they thought that Indians were all backwards. So for, you know, and also because the British, being part of Europe, wanted to, in the Age of Enlightenment, wanted to feel like all white European civilizations were superior to all other parts of the world and blah, blah, blah. And they came to India and they're like, oh, Indians are so backwards, blah, blah, blah. But as the archaeological understanding, that was happening even in the 19th century. People were like reading the Bhagavad Gita from Europe and commenting on how superior the Vedic race was. But as we go along, more and more archaeological digs are happening, with finding that all the things coming from the Vedas were superior technology, superior ability in everywhere from astrology, astronomy, mathematics, archaeological, architecture, and science, and spirituality, spiritual science, and medicine. Everything that you could possibly think of was superior to modern day civilization. So here they even say almost all the palaces were skyscrapers, so extremely tall places. And each and every house there was big pots of gold and silver and grain stocked in underground rooms. There were many golden water pots within the rooms. The bedrooms were bedecked with jewels, and the floors were mosaic pavements of Marakata jewels. The Vishnu deity, worshipped by the descendants of Yadu, were installed in each house in the city. The residential quarters were so arranged that the different castes, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, had their respective quarters. It appears from this that the caste system was existing even at that time. In the center of the city, there was another residential quarter made specifically for King Krsna. This place was the most dazzling of all the houses. So, we're going to read a little bit more of the Dwarka city and then find out what happens with Kalayavana and Krsna, and we're going to see what happens in that story. It's very exciting, actually, in a way that Krsna allows his devotees to serve him by even sometimes killing his own enemies. So thank you very much. This is a really wonderful story, as usual, and let's chant a little bit. Haribol. Capo. Sorry, my capo. Tagore. Okay, Haribol, that's all for today. And stay tuned for the next one. Please remember, if you haven't, like my video, subscribe to my channel, and feel free to comment in the comment sections. Any questions, any thoughts. I have a lot of videos on there. Feel free to go through there and watch them and share with your friends. Thank you very much. My name is Janapati Das. Namaste.